Good morning. Welcome to HuffPost Live. I'm Ricky Camilleri, and these are the top stories for Thursday, March 19th. Well, at least 9 people have been arrested in connection with Wednesday's terrorist attack in the Tunisian capital of Tunis that left 23 people dead and over 50 injured, most of them foreign tourists. Armed militants opened fire on people as they exited tour buses at the Bardo Museum, a popular tourist spot adjacent to the National Parliament. Gunmen took hostages inside the museum for nearly 2 hours before security forces entered and freed the hostages, killing 2 of the gunmen. The assault is one of Tunisia's deadliest terrorist attacks, as the country has avoided the high levels of violence recently seen in Middle East countries such as Syria, Yemen, and Libya. Prime Minister Habib Assid said that he is working with other countries to gather more information on the gunmen and any organizations that may be behind the attack. Meanwhile, Tunisia's tourism industry, which the country relies on heavily, is expected to take a hit. In other world news, the United Nations is calling for the Islamic State to be prosecuted in an international criminal court. The UN Human Rights Council launched an investigation last fall after the Islamic State took hold of northern Iraq. In interviewing more than 100 victims and witnesses, they found evidence of crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide. They also allege that the extremist organization used chlorine gas, which is a prohibited chemical weapon. The UN will continue their investigation as the Islamic State maintains its foothold in Iraq, Syria, and Libya. Now, it's no secret the Islamic State is actively recruiting new members. Often they target young Western men. Among them was 22-year-old Damien Claremont, a young Canadian man who was raised Christian but converted to Islam in his teens after experiencing issues with depression and dropping out of school. At first, his newfound faith seemed to put him back on the right track. But soon, Damien met with a recruiter for the Islamic State who convinced him to join the terror group in Syria, and then about a year ago, Damien was executed by the Free Syrian Army. Now his mother, Christiane Boudreau, is trying to prevent this from happening to other families. Christiane joins us now. Chris, hello.
Hello.
Thanks so much for being here. Talk to me about your son and what led to his conversion to Islam.
Well, I think he was looking for something back then when he'd gone through his depression, trying to straighten out his life. And he was having difficulty associating with the Christian faith and the Bible. He said there were too many contradictions. So he did some research and found that the Quran spoke more to what he felt and converted, and it was peaceful. He settled down, started working again, and started getting back out in the social world. We met some great friends of his, and things were going really well.
Now, did you have any indication at all that he was even thinking about joining ISIS? Do you know what the sales pitch the recruiter gave him was?
We didn't know anything. I mean, this was 2008 when he converted and everything was good. Things didn't start to change for him until 2011. And that's about the time that he met this particular person who boasted how he introduced Damien to the ideology, gave him some books to read, gave him some links on the internet to go research and dig into. And that's when things started to change. Things started to happen. And then he started studying with a group of other Calgarians here who also went over eventually.
So how did you react when you found out where he was?
Well, I didn't find out. He told us he was going to Egypt and left in November 2012. I didn't find anything out until the end of January 2013 when our Canadian security intelligence came here and let us know that they were suspicious that that's indeed where he'd gone instead. I was sick to my stomach. I had no idea what this movement was about, didn't understand anything about it, didn't even realize that this type of thing existed, and spent a good amount of my time after that researching everything to try to get some more understanding.
Now you've created this this program called Mothers for Life. Talk to me about what you hope to achieve with it.
Mothers for Life is in coordination with Daniel Kohler from Germany. We work in getting mothers together on an international level so we can start working on projects for proactive change and to start helping and supporting these families that are being victimized and left behind. We're hoping to introduce an open public letter, send it to the UN as well, with all mothers united, supporting one another to give us a voice to make that change.
Now, what are some of the signs families should look for if they're concerned a loved one is being radicalized? Were there signs at all?
Well, hindsight's 2020. Looking back with the knowledge I have now, absolutely there were. There was the physical appearance. He grew out his beard, cut his hair really short. But most of all, as a mom, I could sense he was agitated, stressed out, almost restless. You could feel that change. He wasn't at peace anymore. And then he started bringing up issues with the Middle East, war in other worlds, how we as a Western world weren't doing enough to help the women and children that were being tortured. He started bringing up 9/11 conspiracy theories. He was even more rigid in his beliefs in the Islamic faith. So whereas before, it was a normal family interaction, all of a sudden, if we had wine at the table, he wouldn't come. He would talk about having more than one wife, things that weren't of modern day convention, and also started segregating himself, becoming very private. We weren't meeting his friends anymore. Phone calls were taken outside of the house. So we could see those.
Chris, that's pretty extreme behavior. How did you and your family react to it? How did you handle it?
Well, at the time, we thought it was just a phase he was going through. Again, we didn't understand anything with regards to any foreign fighting, that there was any types of movements that he would join. And we were told, you were raised in Canada, it's a safe country, nothing happens here. We truly believed it. If anything, I was just concerned that he was going back into a depressive state. And we talked to him about that. And he was adamant that he felt fine. And he was still getting outside of the house. He lived on his own, and we couldn't see everything under our nose all the time, only when he came to visit.
Now, the United States is embracing programs like Mothers for Life to help counter recruitment efforts. How is the Canadian government responding?
So far as it stands, we haven't had any response from the Canadian government for Mothers for Life or to the other program I have that works with families in distress, a Hyatt Canada Family Support. We haven't had any feedback. They haven't reached out. They haven't responded to anything at this point in time and pretty much are ignoring our existence. So we'll see. We're going to keep persevering and trying to get their attention and get them to join on board, because this is needed across the board, across Canada.
Absolutely. It's incredible work that you're doing, Chris. Thanks so much for joining, and I'm sorry for your loss. Now, one person is dead and 5 wounded after a shooting spree in Mesa, Arizona on Wednesday morning. The suspect, 41-year-old Elliot Guru, shot his first victims at a motel before shooting another victim at a nearby restaurant. Guru then stole a car and shot his final victim inside an apartment complex. The rampage came to an end when police captured Guru, who has a long criminal background and is currently on probation. According to police, Guru has served prison sentences in the past for theft, burglary, and attempted aggravated assault. With media saturation of school shootings across the country, today's parents' biggest worry may not be whether their child pays attention in class, but whether they're safe in the classroom. According to the Brady campaign, there have been 14 school shootings just in 2014 alone, and 33 since the tragedy at Sandy Hook Elementary School, where a 20-year-old gunman killed 20 young students and 6 staff members. Luckily for my next guest, Charles Martin, his 15-year-old was spared that fate when students at his son's Oklahoma school alerted police after learning one of their friends was planning a mass school shooting. In a heartfelt letter titled "To the Teen Who Planned to Kill My Son," Charles Martin has done something no parent has done before: thank the suspect. Martin joins me now. Welcome, Martin.
How are you doing?
Very good. Thanks so much for being here. You took a pretty unique approach in your reaction to the possible shooting. What was the impetus for writing this letter? What made you do it?
Well, ultimately, he didn't really attempt to do it. He planned everything out, but he, at least in my mind, he tipped his hand specifically to try and get caught. What it seemed like, at least from my removed from perspective, was that he sent those texts to his friends to give them that opportunity to prevent him from doing something that he couldn't prevent himself from doing. So it just seemed like he was looking for a way out of this horrible deep, desperate hole he'd found himself in. And I thought it was appropriate to try and show him some empathy, that, to thank him for doing his part in stopping his own attack.
For yourself, Charles, was that empathy coming from a place of knowing that he may have felt incredibly alone and sort of extending an olive branch almost to this person who may need people?
Of course. I remember vividly what it was like whenever I was a teenager, those times where you felt like the world is completely out of your control, that you're trying to make sense of the world, you're trying to find your place in it. And if you don't feel like you have any reason to go on, any control over the way your life is heading, and you're just stuck in this hopeless alienation, then it's easy to follow that into a really, really dark path. So I don't understand the idea of trying to take other people's lives to make your mark, but I understand wanting to go to great lengths to try and impact the world and the way that it's impacting you.
It's a desperate need for a connection in many ways, and it's the absolute worst way to go about getting it. Charles, you weren't notified until Sunday, while the student was removed on Friday. Why do you think it took so long for you to find out?
I work 2 jobs, and I have kids, and sometimes I fall out of the media loop. I don't really think that it taking that long is necessarily any kind of indication of a breakdown in communication between us and the school, so much as that particular weekend I had a really full plate and didn't find out until Sunday. If there had been a shooting, I'm sure that the media saturation would have let me know, but it was a threat. It was something that didn't follow through, so it seems it seemed much more abstract. It didn't resonate as it would have had he actually really tried to carry it through. So I think that lag is just more of me just falling out of the news cycle for a couple of days, and then by the time I resurfaced, 2 days had passed.
After publishing the letter on your site, you received over 20,000 views, and it ended up actually crashing your site. Did you expect such a huge reaction?
Not at all. Not at all. It was something that I wrote really quickly. I didn't even have my assistant, my associate editor, look it over, which is why we had a typo go through. That is kind of horrifying. We didn't anticipate it at all. We haven't had that massive surge of traffic on the site before, so the site was not ready for it. We've since updated to a new server and repaired all the damage that was done to our site. I hoped that we would get a lot of positive feedback. That was a big part of writing it. And any writer wants something that they write to resonate, to have some sort of impact. But it really felt like it kind of turned into something that was a little out of our control. And it was very fortunate that the letter got picked up by so many other news outlets. So then in the 2 days that it took us to finally repair our website, this letter had kind of taken on a life of its own. So it's been really good. It's been really good. We've gotten a lot of really good feedback, mostly positive. I think one negative comment that we got that I thought was really astute was that I hadn't really pointed out that part of the reason that this kid's path went that way wasn't just because of the school or the parents, but it was also, as a community of Edmond, we also failed this kid. We didn't do what we needed to do to make him feel like he had a stake in keeping this community safe. And I think that was a really smart comment that I wish I'd picked up on and thrown in the original letter.
Now, Charles, do you have any idea as to whether or not this letter has reached the kid that it's addressed to? And if it does reach him, would you meet with him? Would you have a conversation with him?
I have no idea if it's reached him. He is in an inpatient facility, so I'm not sure if, I imagine, but I don't know, that his therapist had probably locked down the outside world so they could really just focus on him and he can focus on himself. But if it does reach him and he wants to reach out to me, I would absolutely like to talk with him. I probably wouldn't do it in a public forum because that seems like that would be the wrong. It seemed like it would be the wrong way to do it. It might, if I was in his position, I would probably resent that. But yeah, absolutely. If that does happen, I would definitely like to open up that dialogue.
Charles, thanks so much for being here. The National Urban League is releasing its State of Black America report today. The annual report compares blacks and Hispanics to whites in the categories of economics, education, health, social justice, and civic engagement. It reports that black Americans are 72% equal to white Americans, indicating a slight improvement from last year's 71.5%. And when you break down the findings in each category, the gap widens even further, with economics at 56%, education at 76%, and health at 80%. Despite tensions over the death of unarmed black men by police, the largest growth category compared to last year's report was social justice, with the biggest decrease in economics. Hispanics Equality Index came in at 77.7%, a couple points higher than last year. National Urban League CEO Mark Morial hopes that the report will inspire policy changes, as we still have a long way to go. He told CBS News, "The world I'd like you to think about is crisis. It's a jobs crisis, it's a justice crisis, it's an education crisis. You can walk over here and you can look at the numbers and you can cheer, but then when you look more closely, there's another story, and that's the story of those being left behind. And to me, that's the point. It's a tale of two nations." Well, New Yorkers are just beginning to thaw out, while at the same time, Boston has had record-breaking snowfall this year. But believe it or not, Earth has had its warmest winter ever. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, this winter was about 1.4 degrees warmer than the 20th century average. Most of the planet had higher than normal land and air temperatures in February, which was the second warmest February on record. That blue splotch you see there, that's the Northeast United States and Canada, where several cities actually experienced the coldest February on record and seemingly unending snow. It even flurried here in New York City yesterday, with more on the way tomorrow. Thanks a lot, Mother Nature. By contrast, several states out west actually had some of the warmest winters ever, including California, which is entering its fourth year of severe drought. It's so bad, actually, that the state may only have 1 year of water left. And they say climate change isn't real. Turning to sports, the NCAA tournament starts today with 16 games over 12 hours on 4 TV stations. To help make sense of the madness, I'm joined by Neil Payne, a senior sports writer for 538. Hey, Neil.
Hey, good to be here.
So it's not too late to tinker with our brackets. So I guess let's talk predictions, right? Undefeated Kentucky starts its quest today for the first perfect season since 1976. Neil, you guys at 538 have analyzed the stats and created these pretty complex models. It's almost practically impossible the Wildcats will lose to Hampton, but what are the chances of winning at all?
Well, we say that they have a 41% chance of winning the whole tournament, which, depending on how you look at it, might seem really high if you think about the fact that last year Louisville was our favorite and they had a 15% chance of winning. Or it could seem really low if you watch the highlights and you hear Dick Vitale, for instance, talking about it. You might wonder if Kentucky could ever lose a game. But I think winning any 6 straight games, especially against really good teams, as they'll have to face as they go deeper into the tournament, is pretty tough to begin with. So that 41% is kind of a product of that.
Give me a couple possible upsets you could see and why.
Well, so today there are a couple of what we like to call almost like fake upsets, where the committee has seeded things so that our model has as the favorite the lower seeded team. For instance, the big one today is Ohio State and Virginia Commonwealth. Ohio State actually, according to our model, has a 64% chance of winning, but they're the 10 seed and VCU is the 7 seed. And then another one that's going to happen today is Texas and Butler. That's a game where Texas was one of those bubble teams that barely got into the tournament. But if you look at their whole season and their strength of, their performance throughout the whole year, they have a 54% chance of beating Butler, even though they're the lower seeded team.
You actually wrote that we should be pretty wary of overachievers. Explain what that means. Which highly seeded teams are in danger of an early exit?
So that's a situation where our research has shown that teams that start the season maybe not as highly regarded by the Associated Press or by the computer ratings, and then they sort of have a surprise season as the year goes on, those can make for great stories, but a little bit of that preseason disregard that the voters have had for them carries over into March. So those teams that seemingly come out of nowhere, Maryland is an example of a team that wasn't as highly regarded in the preseason, for instance. Those teams tend to underperform in March, and maybe that's something. And on the flip side of that, North Carolina is a team that was ranked, I believe, 6th in the AP poll going into the season. They didn't have as strong a season as maybe that would have implied, but once you get into the tournament, they still have that underlying talent, so they might be a team to watch to pull a few upsets.
Neil, top-seeded Villanova was ranked 2nd overall by the selection committee, behind only Kentucky. Do you think there's a statistical reason that they could be vulnerable?
Well, right now, our model has Villanova as the second most likely team to win the tournament. So that's an 11% chance. But if you start digging into the particulars of the style of play that they have, it's kind of interesting. They play in a way that's more suited to an underdog. So they shoot a lot of threes and they force a lot of turnovers, and particularly they get a lot of steals. And those are the kind of behaviors that research has shown lead to teams that are not favored kind of pulling the upset, because they add to the amount of variance that's in the game. They sort of allow you to have a chance at beating the favorite through just like, if you have a good performance and have all the dice rolls roll your way, if you will, then you can win. But if you're the favorite like Villanova is and they're a 1 seed, maybe introducing all that variance isn't the best way to go. So they might be a team that, because of the style they play, they would be more suited to be an underdog, and the fact that they're a favorite, it works against them.
Neil, thanks so much. Well, it looks like the blurred lines on the Marvin Gaye legal dispute are still a little hazy. Earlier this month, Pharrell Williams and Robin Thicke were found guilty of copyright infringement and ordered to pay the late Marvin Gaye's family a total of $7.3 million for copying Gaye's 1977 hit, Gotta Give It Up. But the buck doesn't stop there. The Gaye family is now going after rapper T.I., who received a pass but does appear on the record. As the motion reads, all the members of the distribution chain are liable for copyright infringement, including co-writer of the song Blurred Lines Clifford Harris Jr. and the Interscope parties who manufactured, licensed, distributed, and sold the infringing song, both as a single and as part of the album Blurred Lines. But T.I. isn't the only rapper in trouble. After pleading not guilty to both murder and attempted murder, Death Row co-founder Suge Knight is still behind bars, but it looks like a new confession may help his case. Clebone Sloan, the sole survivor in the deadly hit-and-run accident, has admitted to physically assaulting the rap mogul before the incident occurred. He told Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department that he, quote, fucked him up after a verbal dispute with Knight at a prior location. This new admission adds validity to Knight's self-defense claim in the accident, which left one dead. In another case where art imitates life, real estate heir Robert Durst's bombshell confession has turned his made-for-HBO drama into a reality. The millionaire was arrested on Tuesday after what some are calling a confession. During the filming of The Jinx, a 6-part docu-series about his life, Durst muttered to himself during a bathroom break that he had killed them all, of course. Now courts are questioning whether his so-called confession has legality and if it will be admissible in court. Joining me now to discuss his case and more is John Burns, entertainment lawyer and legal analyst. John, thanks so much for being here. How are you?
Good to see you, Ricky. Doing great.
Killed them all, of course. Muttered in a bathroom with a hot mic. Is this admissible in court?
Well, you know, it's a number of different things. Obviously, from a defense perspective, it's not a statement you want, but it's a really ambiguous statement. You have to really think about it. He was really speaking as a narrative. He was almost talking as if voices were talking to him. So he wasn't directly responding to a question, and his mental state obviously is an issue here too. And then you also have to think about from a admissibility standpoint too, from a Fourth Amendment perspective, did he have a reasonable expectation of privacy in a restroom? Some people could argue yes, because he agreed to be audio taped, you agreed to be videotaped. But then a good defense attorney would say everyone has an expectation of privacy in a bathroom, no matter what, if you agree to it or not. So in terms also of admissibility, you have to look at authentication. Was that audio tape authenticated? Was it actually him? What's the chain of custody? Was it edited? So it's a number of different things that go into that.
What's the contextual legality of it? Because there's a context to a confession where it's I'm being interrogated. I confess to you that I did this. I've signed paper. Going into a bathroom and muttering to yourself, there are so many different contexts that could be applied. So
many different contexts. As I said before, he wasn't answering a direct question. Yes. It was more really like we couldn't really figure out the mutterings. There was a number of different things that were really ambiguous about that statement. So it's not this overarching, really direct confession that most people are suggesting it is.
Now, apparently Hollywood is frantically looking for true crime stories to turn into movies and TV shows. I'm curious, what kind of legal work goes into telling these stories, and what kind of fears plague filmmakers, novelists, podcasters when they're telling stories that involve the justice system and real lives?
Well, you want to make it as credible and as authentic as possible. And I think obviously it really has those two crucial elements that people love to see in terms of crime dramas. It has mystery, it has conflict. So obviously these stories do very, very well. With that being said, it takes a lot of diligence. If you think about the Durst case, the directors and producers spent years with him really digging deep into that case. And lawmakers and police and prosecutors just don't have that time. And that's why these crime dramas work so well behind the camera.
So what you say and who you say it to definitely holds a lot of weight in the court system, as you were saying before.
Absolutely.
I mean, not in a bathroom, but actually in a court. In the Suge Knight case, we said Bone admits to fighting with Suge before being mowed over. Could the court actually see that as self-defense, considering that the fight was before Suge Knight got in a car and ran somebody over?
Well, no. So this is huge here. This is huge. So this Mr. Sloan's coming out saying he was punching Suge Knight through the driver's side window as he pulled up. So he actually prevented Suge Knight from getting out of the car. He made this statement. So if these statements are credible and they're deemed admissible, this is huge. It completely turns the case on its head and really validates and bolsters Suge Knight's self-defense claim.
Wow. The lines for liability on the gay case are blurred, literally blurred. Why wasn't T.I. included in the first suit? And what does the Marvin Gaye family have to gain from including him now?
Well, they're not only including T.I., they're including Universal Music, they're including Interscope Records, including Star Trek Entertainment, amongst others.
Is it just more money?
More money. First of all, more money, but they also want to persuade the court to issue an injunction. Right now, they're not only pushing for more money, but they also want Marvin Gaye to be included as one of the co-writers on the song. So, and along with what they did on Tuesday, they filed an injunction to basically halt the sales, performance, distribution of blurred lines for a period of time until they can figure out if he's going to be assigned to be a co-writer, and they want to figure out the royalty payments down the road. So more money, more money, more money.
So who should split the profits at the end of the day, you think?
So I think, we have to look at the internal composition. So Marvin Gaye had a copyright in the composition, in the actual song, not in the sound recording. And that's why the jury found it appropriate to assess liability just strictly against the songwriters, and that was Pharrell Williams and Robin Thicke. With that being said, I think the appropriate parties have already been held liable. So I don't think the record labels and T.I. really had much to do with it.
Do you think this is the Gaye family getting a little greedy?
I don't know if it's greed. I think it's definitely trying to put your best foot forward and really press for all options. Obviously, I think they have a great claim in the sense that Marvin Gaye obviously produced great music, but I think probably they're being advised by counsel to pursue additional types of relief.
John, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Ricky. I appreciate it.
A Brooklyn woman is accused of stealing $85,000 from a work bank account in order to buy Beyonce tickets, clothes, and other items. Sharon Davidson, the ex-director of the North Flatbush Business Improvement District, was indicted on charges including grand larceny and scheming to defraud. Brooklyn District Attorney Ken Thompson says Davidson used the work account as her own personal piggy bank. Investigators found that she allegedly spent $13,000 on PayPal to buy clothes and jewelry, $3,000 at Fresh Direct, $600 on Beyonce tickets, and $400 on manicures and pedicures, among other lavish purchases. Davidson abruptly resigned from the BID last year. The nonprofit helps promote businesses on Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn. The businesses pay an annual fee that's used for promotion and local improvements. The group was in a large deficit when Davidson left, prompting an audit and the discovery of the fraud. Davidson's attorney says his client says she is innocent and looks forward to clearing her name in court. That is all we have for Top Stories today. I'm Ricky Camilleri. Thank you so much for watching. You guys should stick around because The Fault in Our Stars author John Green and actress Halston Sage join Nancy Red to chat about their new film, paper towns.